Hey, this is Ari, and in this video, you're going to see a little clip from a podcast I did with Dr. Keisha Ewers on how trauma is linked with gut health and brain health and hormonal health and energy levels. So I strongly encourage you, check out this clip and make sure you go deeper on this topic by clicking the link below this video to watch the full-length episode. Enjoy.
The science is interesting. There was a particular study looking at childhood trauma and microbial balance that was done on 115 kids that were in an institution. So this was prior to adoption, before they were 2 years of age. And they looked at them and their microbial balance next to 229 kids that were raised by their biological parents. And what they found is, and it would, it kind of makes sense, institutional care kids had less microbial diversity. But then the interesting thing that this study did is they weren't just measuring microbial diversity, but they were also doing PET scans on the brains to see what the brain changes were in these kids in relationship to their trauma and their microbial diversity. And what they found was that there was less prefrontal cortex volume and development in the kids that came from an institutional background, which means lower emotional processing. Now, our prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until we're 26 years of age anyway, but the coming online in the developmental process was actually hampered because of this trauma. Whereas the kids that came out of a biological family unit had an increase in the biodynamic microbiome diversity, as well as better prefrontal cortex brain development, which means better emotional regulation. The emotional regulation piece, I want you to kind of put a pin in and remember, because that part is going to become very important as we talk about some new science that's recently come out that bridges why this actually matters in terms of adult human energy and health. So some other research, I could bury people with research in this, but a couple of high points. History of trauma is reported in half of adults with any kind of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And then gastrointestinal symptoms in young kids have now been started to be thought of as red flags for future emotional health problems. And then post-traumatic stress disorder, when that's been diagnosed, what has been done in studies when looking at microbial diversity once again, it shows that the total of 3 really important organisms are not there with people that are diagnosed with PTSD. Now, we know that post-traumatic stress disorder is not just about your microbial balance. It also has to do with living conditions, hence the study on the kids that were institutionalized has to do with childhood experiences. There's a very famous study that I'll briefly talk about that you hear a lot about, the adverse childhood experiences study, and then also genetics. And so the gut bacteria piece is the part that influences the brain, that gut-brain axis that we hear a lot about. And this is the brain function that is all about producing those neurotransmitters that make us feel good, help us focus, help us concentrate, help us remember. How many of my patients come in, they're fatigued, they don't have superhuman energy. They can't remember anything. They're worried because they think they have Alzheimer's, because they can't remember why they walked into the kitchen, and they're getting really concerned about how often that's showing up. They have inflammation, and they are depressed and anxious and not sleeping very well. A lot of those folks, because I see a lot of people with autoimmune disease, also have immune issues with, undiagnosed autoimmune issues. Turns out all of these are very much interrelated. So there was a study that was done in Europe of over 1,000 Belgians and 1,000 Dutch people. And again, a couple of really important organisms missing from people that self-reported and were diagnosed as depressed subjects. And what those 2 organisms actually are in large part responsible for is butyrate, which is an anti-inflammatory, and dopamine, which is the piece that I was just mentioning around mood and memory, as well as motivation, energy, and libido level in women particularly. So we're seeing this crosstalk a lot between the gut and the brain, but then also, So I do a lot of speaking from stages as I call myself Mother Fokker, the Mrs. Fokker from Meet the Parents. I'm very much like her. And she was a sexologist. And I talk a lot from stage, talking to clinicians, trying to help them understand the importance of asking the right questions about libido as not just sexual, but also life force vitality, passion for the things that you're excited about, the ability and willingness to be intimate and vulnerable, and to really have the energy to seek out your life mission, purpose, and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that you can say about that is that if there's not enough dopamine, then none of those things are present.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to help people understand that libido level is actually another vital sign, right? And it's a little bit of a sideways window of looking at dopamine. And what do we reach for in our culture if we have dopamine issues? We reach for our short chain carbohydrates, energy drinks, caffeine, all the things that I know you are all about helping people come off of so they can really discover their root source of energy instead of these chemicals, right?
100%.
So, yeah, I do genetic testing on all my patients now, and I see that a lot of these folks actually have genetic SNPs that make it difficult for dopamine to be synapsed properly.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to talk about one of the synapse pruners in the brain that get overreactive. They're called microglia when you are not emotionally regulating well. So all these things come together, right? It's not one system behaving by itself. It's not about mitochondria all by itself. It's not about a genetic SNP all by itself. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
they all work together. And pulling some of the science together is fascinating because you can see people are starting to make these connections. And that this history of childhood trauma, right, is, I called it in my book, Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, the missing piece of the puzzle, because we're finding there was a really interesting study that was looking at people with lowered microbial diversity, right? A history of childhood trauma, and then people with the exact same digestive issues those folks had, but no early life trauma, and then people that didn't have digestive issues or trauma, and all those bugs were so different. And what they found is the ones with childhood trauma, they had a harder time getting them to have, they would do fecal transplants. They would do different things that are big dose of probiotics, right? And it wasn't working. And so the outcome of this that was in Microbiome in 2017 said, there's a quote that I just kind of shook my head. The changes in the gut microbiome made in response to trauma could potentially last a lifetime based on the stress gut-brain connection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is why it is said that the higher your score of adverse childhood experiences, the higher your risk for autoimmune issues in adulthood and cancer and heart disease. But the thing of it is what this sentence doesn't actually remind us of is that all this can be changed. You heal your trauma, and actually research shows us that we can change the biodiversity of our gut. So what they were doing is they were just focusing on the microbiome. They weren't focusing on the emotional regulatory cycle that was happening up in the other brain.
Hey, this is Ari. I hope you enjoyed this video. And one more thing before you go. Actually, two more things. One is if you enjoyed this particular little clip, the link to the full-length podcast is in the description down below. So make sure to check that out. Also, one more thing. Let me ask you a question. What if I could show you how to double your energy levels and dramatically improve your brain function, reducing your anxiety and depression to a degree on par with antidepressant drugs, but without the side effects? Sound pretty interesting? Well, there are, in fact, numerous compounds that can do this, that have been shown to do this. And I'll take you through just a few of these very briefly. One of them is rhodiola rosea. And this has been shown in studies, rhodiola rosea extract, in people with stress-related fatigue and exhaustion to cut their levels of fatigue and brain fog in half in less than a month. Just this one compound. There's another compound in my formula Energenesis called NT factor phospholipids that's been shown to help repair mitochondrial membranes and mitochondrial health to the level of healthy 29-year-olds, taking people with deteriorated mitochondria who are over the age of 65, restoring it to the level of healthy 29-year-olds. And that has been shown in numerous studies in various types of chronic fatigue, aging-associated chronic fatigue, obesity-related chronic fatigue syndrome, to increase energy levels by 30 to 45% in the span of 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the specific study. So dramatic improvements in a very, very short period of time. Two more compounds that are amazing, I highly recommend, that are in my formula Ultra Brain, along with Rhodiola rosea. Saffron extract. This has been shown to increase levels of, improve your mood, I should say, and decrease levels of depression on par with fluoxetine, which is Prozac. And not only that, but with fewer side effects. It's much safer and much less likely to cause negative effects than antidepressant drugs are. Acetyl L-carnitine is another compound that's been shown to dramatically improve brain health in older adults. It also improves energy levels in older adults with chronic fatigue by between 40 to 50% in just the span of 2 to 4 months. And the last thing I'll mention here is acetyl L-carnitine has also been compared to antidepressant drugs and been shown, like saffron, to be as effective as antidepressant drugs in combating depression, but without the harmful side effects that so often occur with the drugs. So this is just a small sampling of the over 35 compounds that are in my formulas, Energenesis and Ultra Brain, that are all proven to dramatically improve energy levels, mitochondrial health, and brain health, and much, much more. And I highly recommend that you go check these out. If you're struggling with depression or anxiety or brain fog, if you're struggling with stress-related exhaustion and burnout, if you're struggling with chronic fatigue, go check out these formulas, give them a shot. I promise you are going to be blown away by the results. And like I said, the science has already proven that these things work. So you don't have to just take my word for it. There's lots of research to support that, and I'll even link to some of that research down below so you can verify everything that I just said for yourself. So the links to those studies will be in the description for this video down below. So check them out. Check out the formulas on the energyblueprint.com. Again, Energenesis is the mitochondrial formula, and Ultra Brain is our brain formula. Check them out, try them out, and I think you're going to be blown away by the results. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you again soon.